Most people wouldn't think, looking at me today, a board member, a church member, project engineer, and a family man, that I used to be a drug dealer, a drug user, and a thief. Don't get me wrong, I'd heard about Jesus, and I went to church some, but then there was one day that I made it personal. This is my story. Almost everyone I know came from some kind of dysfunctional home, and my home was no exception. My dad was a workaholic until I was about 12 years old, and then he became an alcoholic. But I didn't really care. We lived on a farm, and I had all kinds of freedom. The neighbor kid and I grew pot down behind the barn. You know, the farm kids, a lot of things happened down behind the barn. We also had people that could buy beer for us, so we were usually partying on the weekends at the neighbor's house. I started smoking at around 13 or 14, was using marijuana by the age of 14. My dad was one of our buyers, so he thought he was doing me a favor by buying me wine and letting me drive his truck. At the age of 14, he was teaching me to be able to drink and drive. And one time I guess I had too much to drink and almost drove into the ditch, so my drunk driver's training was over for that day. Looking back at that now, I call that stuff poison. My dad had been poisoned by his dad and by society, and he was just passing it on to me. But I was living the life. I didn't need God. I thought these things were what grown-ups did, and it was normal. Pot was my drug of choice, and pretty soon I was using meth and speed and LSD and coke. I remember saying when I was 14 that I wouldn't take LSD, but by the time I was 16 I was using it. My 16th birthday, my dad was in rehab, and I think it was his first time, but I didn't really care. I had a car, a driver's license, and drugs, so I was free. It's funny to think how blind we can be that when we're in bondage to all this stuff that we think we're free. When I was 13 or 14, I went to church, mostly to play softball because there were girls there. I learned about Jesus, knew a little bit about Jesus, but I didn't know Jesus. I really didn't want to think about it much. I knew it was a commitment and that I was afraid of things that I'd have to give up. I also thought that when I was young that I had plenty of time and that maybe when I was old I'd become a Christian. Besides, I liked the freedom and the poison, so I just tried not to think about it. Soon I made friends with all the drug dealers, and because I was still in high school, I was the guy to get drugs from. By the time I was 18, I was high every day and drinking pretty heavily. I tried to numb my thoughts by partying and having fun, or so I thought. But soon things began to unravel. I had a drug dealer buddy and his wife that had befriended me. He caught his wife in bed with another guy and stabbed him to death and went to Jackson prison. I had another old drug dealer that his house was auctioned off by the U.S. Marshals. And I came home one night from a party about 4 a.m. and in the morning when I looked at my car, it had a big dent in it. I didn't know how it got there. My buddy said I'd driven in and out of the ditch. So I don't know how I got home safely. All these things were unraveling, and I couldn't stay in my party life forever. I had something that some other people don't have. I had someone praying for me. I didn't tell you much about my mother, but during this time my mom came to know Jesus. She'd always been a nice person. She had been brought up in Lutheran church. She went to all the classes, and she thought she was a Christian. But an old friend of my dad's had stopped by the house and The guy was now a Baptist minister, and talked to my dad, and my mom listened to it, and it made her cry. It made my dad mad, but my mom was convicted that she wasn't a true Christian, and that she really hadn't given her life to Jesus. Sometime later, she turned her life over to Jesus, and she started praying for us. And so, through all those years that I was poisoning myself, my mom was praying for me. And many times in my life, I could have been killed, but I believe that my mom's prayers had kept me safe, even though I didn't deserve it. I also had a buddy that had a praying mom too. And we'd almost drove off cliff in a gravel pit one night, and almost drove into the side of a moving train in the dark on a gravel road. And I drove in the ditch many times, but never hit anything. I tried to get control. I threw out a bag of LSD, started cutting back on the pot smoking. But on the day of Easter 1982, 1 month before my 21st birthday, I gave it all up. I came home from church service that I'd gone to with my mom. You know, we all went to church on Easter and Christmas. Anyways, I got down beside my bed and asked Jesus to forgive me of my sins and to help me to live for Him and to free me from the poison that was in my life. And at that moment, I felt something lift off me. I really did. It was like something was on my back and it just lifted off. Jesus became more than just a person from my past. He became personal to me. I stopped thinking about what I'd had to give up and all my questions. I gave it all to Jesus. Jesus changed my life. I felt truly free. I had no desire to get high or to smoke cigarettes or do drugs or use pornography. It is funny how Satan makes us believe that when we're in bondage that we're free. And coming to Jesus is going to make you have to give up things. Also, because over the years I'd seen what a real Christian was, I knew exactly what I was getting into, and I gave it all to Jesus, and He took it. The world is trying to poison us, everyone. I don't care who. Jesus will do anything He can to keep us. Satan will do anything he can do to keep us from Jesus. And that was what he was doing to me. 2 Corinthians 4:4 says, "The God of this age has blinded the minds of the unbelievers, so they cannot see the light of the gospel that's displayed in the glory of Christ, who is the image of God." God changed me, set me free. Believe it or not, I used to like Black Sabbath and AC/DC, Pink Floyd, Highway to Hell and all. And I started liking my mom's Christian music because I didn't want anything but Jesus. I didn't want to go back to the poison. The Bible says to choose this day whom you will serve. Serving myself didn't really work out good for me. They say you can only serve one master, and I think that we all have served the wrong master. I was poisoning myself and I couldn't stop on my own. If it hadn't been for a praying mom and a forgiving God, I don't know where I'd be today. Looking back, I wished I had become a Christian sooner. I wished I hadn't waited so long.